Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Few things in Washington are ever easy. That was certainly true for foreign aid for Ukraine and Israel. After months of debate and political gamesmanship, a bipartisan majority in the House passed 4 bills worth $95 billion over the weekend. The Senate is expected to vote this week. But the turmoil has put Speaker Mike Johnson in the hot seat with some Republicans. For the political stakes, we are joined tonight by Tamara Keith of NPR and Andrew Desiderio of Punchbowl News. Amy Walter is away. It's great to see you both. So after much delay in GOP infighting, the House passed the foreign aid bill on Saturday. Lots of money for Israel, Taiwan, $61 billion for Ukraine. Andrew, how did Speaker Johnson come to embrace aid for Ukraine and defy his right flank? How did he get to yes?
It's quite the 180 that he exhibited over the last year or so. This was a guy who embedded himself with the Republican Study Committee, the Freedom Caucus, throughout his entire tenure in the House of Representatives, voted consistently against every single Ukraine package that came up since the start of the war in 2022, yet is now putting his speakership on the line over this issue. He's credited a couple of things with this sort of transformation, if you will. The first is the fact that he's receiving high-level intelligence briefings that he didn't receive as a rank-and-file member of the House of Representatives. When you're the speaker, you're part of what's called the Gang of Eight, so you get basically the same intel briefings that the president gets, right? And so that was sort of impressed upon him, the stakes of the war in Ukraine and what would happen if the United States does not send these weapons and this funding to Ukraine. The second thing is he talked personally about his own son about to start at the U.S. Naval Academy. And one of the arguments for aiding Ukraine is that we're not putting American boots on the ground, right? And you heard Speaker Johnson say when he was giving his press conference on Saturday, I'd rather American bullets than American boys go to Ukraine. And I think that was a very personal element for him of this as well. And you just saw that play out over the weekend to the point where, again, this is a guy who went from outright opposing Ukraine aid to basically being the one who could influence the tide of this war by deciding to bring this aid package to the floor and having it passed.
And Tim, how does the White House view all of this being split up into individual bills? And is there anything that could threaten the expected passage in the Senate as early as tomorrow?
Right. As long as this gets to the president's desk, the White House is quite happy to have this, what ultimately will be a package. Because in essence, this is what President Biden has been asking for a very long time. There aren't poison pills in there. He isn't being jammed. This is what the president was asking for. For months and months, we would ask the White House, what is your plan? How are you going to get this through the House? And their response, they were fairly restrained in their response, and they just repeated this refrain that, if it got a vote, it would get bipartisan support. It would pass with bipartisan support. It was like a mantra. And ultimately, that's exactly what happened. Not expecting, there certainly could be some drama in the Senate, but ultimately expecting that this probably will get to the president's desk and will become law and everything that involves.
Yeah. And one thing that gets a lot less attention is the TikTok bill. What's the deal with that? This bill that requires new ownership for TikTok over the course of the next year. If not, it would be outright banned in the U.S.
Right. The House of Representatives cobbled together this bill kind of at the last minute a couple of months back, and it basically ignited this big lobbying effort by TikTok and by their allies as well. Basically what it does is it gives TikTok 1 year to divest from ByteDance, which is the Chinese parent company that controls it. And if they do not divest within a year, then the app itself will be banned in the United States. And you had a very interesting cross-section of Democrats and Republicans, both for and against this bill. It cleared the House easily. It got around 350 votes. It never got a vote in the Senate, but Mike Johnson's decision to include this bill in the foreign aid package is what is ultimately going to get it signed into law by President Biden, who has said he supports this bill. But of course, there's that element of politics where he's got a huge chunk of his base that lives on TikTok.
Yeah.
People make money on TikTok. People have their livelihoods on TikTok. And so the consequences, I think, are going to be talked about more once we get past the sort of initial fervor of the foreign aid, which is obviously the highlight of this package.
In Sam, the Biden campaign, they court TikTok influencers. I believe the campaign has a presence on TikTok.
Yeah, the campaign announced with some fanfare that they were creating an account, and they are very actively courting young voters and TikTok voters, and as you say, working with influencers and others. At the same time, though, the president has said that he will sign this legislation. Interestingly, today, former President Donald Trump went out on Truth Social and essentially said, "Hey, young voters, do you have any idea what Joe Biden might sign? What this is happening?" Former President Trump had also himself as president signed a ban on TikTok in the U.S. So it's a bit of a flip-flop, but Trump trying to find a wedge.
And what does the weekend passage of this legislation in the House, Andrew, mean for Speaker Johnson's job? Does this make the motion to vacate that Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, introduced? Does this make this more of a threat?
Let's just say at the outset, the longer this hangs out there as an issue that's being talked about, the more Marjorie Taylor Greene benefits from it, not just from the attention, but also from the fundraising as well. So I think that is an important element of this as well. But what you're going to have basically is when and if she does go forward with this, leadership is going to do what's called a motion to table the motion to vacate, which means you're voting on whether to kill it or not. That will put Democrats on the spot. For Democrats to say, okay, this is not me voting for Mike Johnson or voting for Hakeem Jeffries. This is me voting to dispense with something that would ultimately force the ouster of Mike Johnson, right? That can be viewed a bunch of different ways if you're Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? If Democrats help the majority of Republicans kill that effort, then Marjorie Taylor Greene can essentially say Mike Johnson serves at the pleasure of the Democratic Party, right? And that advances her whole argument, which is that Johnson has caved the Democrats on too many things. And then, for Democrats, it's a question of, Hakeem Jeffries is not going to be the Speaker of the House. Do you really want to cause, more chaos in the House of Representatives? Have this weeks-long speaker fight that we had late last year when Kevin McCarthy was ousted? For some of them, the answer might be yes, because of the political benefit that comes from it. But you already have a number of Democrats who are on the record saying that they would vote for this motion to table the motion to vacate. I know that's a lot of congressional jargon, but it's basically you're voting on whether to kill it outright.
Got it. And Tam, look, you can argue that the divisions within the House GOP conference have never been this evident. Listen to what Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez said on CNN yesterday.
The House is a rough and rowdy place, but Mike Johnson is going to be just fine. I served 20 years in the military. It's my absolute honor to be in Congress, but I served with some real scumbags. Like Matt Gaetz, he paid minors to have sex with him at drug parties. Bob Good endorsed my opponent, a known neo-Nazi. These people used to walk around with white hoods at night. Now they're walking around with white hoods in the daytime.
So, that frustration is out in the clear open.
That is a stunning series of statements to make for a member of Congress to make. The sort of chummy club of Congress is not a chummy, friendly place right now. And it is actually an extremely toxic environment, which is why you have seen several, especially on the Republican side, members of Congress leave before their terms were up and at pretty inconvenient times for the rest of the Republican conference.
Andrew, you mentioned Democrats potentially stepping in to save Speaker Johnson's job. I wonder if you can contextualize what we heard from California Congressman Ro Khanna yesterday.
I'm a progressive Democrat, and I think you would have a few progressive Democrats doing that, and I disagree with Speaker Johnson on many issues and have been very critical of him, but he did the right thing here, and he deserves to keep his job till the end of this term. I don't think everything in politics needs to be transactional. I think here you have Speaker Johnson, who not only put this up for a vote, but he also separated the bills, which I thought was courageous.
So that could be a real possibility, Democrats stepping into the gap there.
Yeah, it could. You already have a number of Democrats on the record saying that they would do this, and that would presumably make up for the small number of Republicans who would vote for this motion to vacate effort. But look, you heard him say it there. Mike Johnson, in their view, did the right thing, and he deserves to be rewarded for that, right? You don't hear that often in politics, especially from a member of the opposite party. One of the reasons why Democrats decided to band together with this effort to oust McCarthy was because, in their view, they couldn't trust him, and they didn't think he would do the right thing on Ukraine, on appropriations, on any issue, you name it, right? They just saw Mike Johnson do what they believe is the right thing, and as a result, this is going to likely be an effort that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, blesses, even if he himself doesn't vote to kill the motion of vacation.
Andrew Desiderio, Tamara Keith, great conversation. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a center for art by artists with disabilities, which has the larger art world paying major attention. Jeffrey Brown recently visited the San Francisco Bay Area for our ongoing look at health and the arts, part of our Canvas series.
A crowded exhibition at SF MoMA, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, known for showing works of leading contemporary artists. On display here, a large abstract painting by 43-year-old Joseph Aliff.
It's a big thing. It's a big accomplishment in my life. And to see a painting like this and to imagine how incredible I did, and it's wow. And it's just being amazing. It's just wow.
Also in the exhibition, Susan Jano.
You probably didn't expect that when you started 21 years ago.
No.
And here I am today, doing exhibitions. I can tell you it's totally amazing.
Jano and Aliff are among some 140 self-taught artists who call Creative Growth Art Center in Oakland, California, their creative home.
It's really awesome.
The organization, celebrating its 50th year, offers an open, light-filled space. Supplies and instructors like Amy Kiefer.
Are these different kinds of cars or just different colors?
Camaraderie and all-around support for people with developmental, mental, and physical disabilities. Executive Director Tom DiMaria.
The idea of being an artist is often a privileged act. So I think if we bring people into an artistic studio and say, you can be creative here, we'll support you, you have materials, please tell us, your story, please experiment, there's no right or wrong here. That's an incredible opportunity.
And you're saying these are people who often have been told the opposite.
Yes, these are people who have been told the opposite. And I think it's as simple as flipping the switch from, I don't want to hear from you to I do want to hear from you. You can't contribute, you can be a major contributor. You're outside of culture, you're a cultural leader. And I think those are important ideas.
Founded in 1974 by Elias Katz and Florence Ludens Katz as part of a burgeoning disability rights movement, Creative Growth is one of 3 such organizations in the Bay Area alone. Not a therapy or a health center, but a working art studio for people making a variety of kinds of art, including on this day, textiles for an upcoming annual fashion show. 59-year-old William Scott was using 3D modeling software to help plan his next painting. He has autism.
I should read a little.
And had prepared a statement for us.
I feel happiness because I am a peacemaker. I feel very proud of my big mural in the museum SF MoMA.
Scott paints versions of himself, family members, and others, and alternative worlds. His 32-foot-long mural at the museum presents a reimagined San Francisco called Praise Frisco.
You're also looking at a different kind of city with no violence. That's right. Yeah. And how does the art let you do that? Because the art makes a real world. It's making the real world. The art makes the real world. It does. It makes the real world. That's why it does that. That's why I do that.
The museum exhibition is titled Creative Growth, the House That Art Built. 80 works by 11 artists, including intricately layered works on paper by Dwight McIntosh and Dan Miller. Brightly colored paintings by Alice Wong and Ron Vesey. Ceramics by John Martin. Susan Jano, who has an intellectual disability, works in a variety of media, including video. In this one, she stares at the camera while posing questions in voiceover.
When I first started going to Creative Growth, I found art and started drawing, and that was my calling.
Joseph Aliff, who has autism, paints most days at Creative Growth.
Going to Creative Growth, that's been a very important part of your life?
Yeah,
Why? Tell me, what do you get from it?
just by going there and get my experience out in how I feel, and just imagine in how I feel in my heart and in my soul, and just paint.
Most striking now, the embrace of these artists by the mainstream art world, where a number of them, including William Scott, are in important collections and leading museums like SF MoMA and earning money for their work. The museum, in fact, recently purchased more than 100 works by creative growth artists, and this exhibition is the start of a 3-year partnership. Katie Siegel is SF MoMA's research director. The hope for this first exhibition, she says,
just to blow people away, overwhelm them with the evidence that these artists are incredibly important. That said, going forward, I'm really most excited in a way about showing that art throughout the whole museum, putting it in the context of the larger collection and showing these artists just like all the other great artists making great artwork in our collection.
So the idea for now has to be an exhibition dedicated to disabled artists, but eventually integrated.
Yes. I think museums have done a lot of gatekeeping over the years around who's a professional artist. And so the idea of having self-trained artists, having artists with differing abilities, having artists from different backgrounds, and judging people not by their certifications, but by their artwork.
Back at Creative Growth Art Center, I asked Executive Director Tom DiMaria about this.
Are you asking people to come see this as the work of a disabled artist?
Right.
Or are you asking them to come see the art?
Yes. So that's the critical question. Is this a disabled art exhibition, or is it an exhibition by artists who have disabilities? And we tend to lead with art, saying that, if the art is interesting, that's why it's in the museum. But there is a very important lived experience of the artist's disability and the culture of disability that's within the work.
That's the advocacy part.
That's the advocacy part. And then once that's happened, you can say, okay, the work is on the wall, and we're in the art world, and now we have something to say.
The magnitude of the museum exhibition brought plenty of emotion, including tears, as well as the support people told us they feel among a community of friends. It all culminated, as every Friday afternoon, with a dance party. One more celebration of a special week in making and showing art. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Kevin J. Patel is a climate activist from Los Angeles. After experiencing health issues due to poor air quality in his city, he founded an organization aimed at giving young people from underserved communities a chance to be change makers. On this Earth Day, he gives his brief but spectacular take on giving climate activism a shot.
When I was younger, my parents told me the story of them leaving India. Both my parents had to come to America not only to seek better opportunities, but as climate migrants, because generations of my family are farmers. In India, with the extreme droughts and extreme weather, it was not livable for farmers. Living in a community like South Central Los Angeles, you get to experience and see a lot of the injustices that occur in my community. One potent example is the lack of access to fresh food, non-GMO, organic, vegan, or even healthier produce within the grocery stores. But what we have an abundance of is fast food restaurants. And I really wanted to do something about it because my father taught me the ways in which to grow our own food. And that really kind of sparked me teaching fellow peers about where their food comes from and speaking out against the issue of food injustice. When I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with an irregular heartbeat that was tied to the air and smog pollution that ravaged South Central Los Angeles. Understanding that air pollution and smog pollution not only impacted myself, but impacted my entire community. I was one of merely thousands and millions of people who are affected because they live in a certain area. One Up Action started in 2019. I didn't see people who looked like me, so One Up Action was really kind of founded in the light of putting marginalized voices at the forefront of not only decision-making tables, but also making sure that their voices, their ideas, their solutions are heard. When people tell me that climate change is inevitable, I always tell them that that's not true. We can still do something about this crisis. I'm very optimistic in the young people who are leading this fight. Everything makes a difference of making sure that we're working together to solve shared issues that are impacting all of us. The possibilities are endless when we do something. My name is Kevin Chipatel, and this is my brief but spectacular take on giving climate activism a shot.
And you can join us here again tomorrow night when we'll look at the growing number of protests over Israel's war in Gaza across college campuses. And that is the News Hour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS News Hour, thank you for joining us and have a good evening.
Major funding for the PBS News Hour has been provided by On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of modern riverboats travel through American landscapes to historic landmarks where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour. Certified financial planner professionals are proud to support PBS NewsHour. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interests. More information at letsmakeaplan.org. The Candida Fund, committed to advancing restorative justice and meaningful work through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. More at candidafund.org. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. You're watching PBS.
In the News Hour tonight, opening statements begin in the trial of former President Donald Trump over alleged hush money payments to boost his 2016 election prospects. Israel's intelligence chief resigns for failing to prevent the October Hamas attack as the war in Gaza grinds on. And the U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments in the case about homelessness with far-reaching consequences.
The implications are huge because so many cities are dealing with this problem, and what the Supreme Court has to say about what